Good evening, everyone. My name is Isa Lorenzo, and I'm the co-director of Silverlens Galleries in Manila. And today we have a very special pair of people that will join us in a discussion about YEE I-Lann and her Borneo Heart. So on the occasion of the Art Basel OVR portals, which is the first curator-led presentation, we have gathered an artist who's based in Kota Kinabalu, Sabah, and a collector who is based in Singapore, who has been looking at the Southeast Asian art scene, art community for the last X number of years. So let me introduce our speakers. Uh, So I'd like to start by welcoming off Jim Amberson, who is originally from Minneapolis but has been based in Asia for the last 23 years. He is a director in a multinational insurer and has been actively collecting Southeast Asian contemporary art for more than 20 years, acquiring works by Dean Kuhle, Sophie Pitch, Andy Weirman, Maria Taniguchi, YEE I-Lann, and more. He has a master's degree from the National University of Singapore in Southeast Asian Studies. Published and a frequent speaker on contemporary Asian art, he is a member of the Development Committee of the Singapore Art Museum and on the advisory panel of CFocus in Singapore, an ambassador of South South based in South Africa, as well as an Asia Pacific patron of the Delfina Foundation and a member of the Asia Pacific Acquisition Committee of the Tate Modern, both based in London. So Jim, welcome to this talk.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy you agreed to join us. I think we've known each other a long time, and you've known I-Lann a long time. So this is very much special because I don't think you and I-Lann have ever been on a panel together, no?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay, our next speaker and the reason why we're all here today is YEE I-Lann, or I-Lann, how we all fondly call her, was born in 1971 in Kota Kinabalu, where she currently lives and works in the Malaysian Borneo state of Sabah. Her primarily photomedia-based practice engages with archipelagic Southeast Asia's turbulent history, with works addressing issues of colonialism, neocolonialism, power, and the impact of historic memory and social experience. Recently, she has moved into working with community of weavers in Sabah, both to revive a craft and art form that has been disappearing, but also to use this art form as a medium of cultural pollination. She has in recent years started working collaboratively with these sea-based and land-based communities and indigenous mediums in Sabah. She is a co-founding associate of the Rice Cooker Archives, Southeast Asian Rock and Roll Treasury with her partner Joe Kidd, and has worked as a production designer in the Malaysian film industry. She is currently a board member for Forever Sabah and the Tamparuli Living Arts Center, both based in Sabah. So welcome, I-Lann.
Thank you for having me here, and also to Art Basel for including Borneo Heart into the OVR portal. It's so exciting.
Yeah, we are so thrilled to be able to show your work in a larger context. I think everyone in Southeast Asia knows who I-Lann is, and it's now time to broadcast her to the world. So maybe we can start with I-Lann. If you could tell us a little bit about your Borneo Heart exhibition.
Well, the irony being that the Borneo Heart show is deeply local to Borneo, to my hometown of Kota Kinabalu and to Sabah. And it's a bit of a homecoming exhibition. It's a big, big collaborative show. There's a lot of people involved, a lot of communities, a lot of Sabah's creative people, a lot of young people. And it's a different way of working for me, and I think for Rogat, the curatorial team, So it has been quite an experiment in terms of contemporary art, community, ideas of the circular economy, putting theory into practice, exercising ideas. It's been a big show, very exciting in the time of COVID, which is challenging, but
So
very fulfilling.
Thank you. This has been your first big exhibition in Kota Kinabalu, yeah?
My first solo, yes. First solo at home, yeah.
And why did it take this long?
Good question, circumstance. I think because I was so long in KL and we tend to get drawn to these art centers, I think, where the infrastructure is easier, where an audience might be, where your network is and your peers are. But then, to me, the centers are only centers because of the other places around them. And so my call home, my call to these other centers, I think, on hindsight now, it's all these other places that give shape to centers, you know? So
Right.
It's taken me a while to get home, but it's been deeply enriching.
Right. Thank you. So Jim, could you let us know a little bit about your, I guess, the mission, vision of your collection?
Okay. I started collecting more than 20 years ago, and it was during that process, did a great deal of exploration. At that time, it was challenging to get access to or to find and learn about contemporary artists in Southeast Asia. Singapore was sort of known as a crossroads, but the galleries and the artists were often away, and so it was a bit more challenging. So the first time I encountered I-Lann's work was when it was on exhibition in Kuala Lumpur at a gallery that is no longer there. But it sort of took a while for me to understand things. And during that process, I also realized that I needed to have a deeper understanding of the cultures and people and backgrounds within Southeast Asia, such a diverse region. And so that's part of the reason why I did a master's degree at National University of Singapore in Southeast Asian Studies. At that time, they didn't have the ability to do a focus on contemporary. And so I ended up doing my main paper on sculpture from the Angkorian period in Cambodia. But throughout this, it was quite exciting to see the diversity of cultures and understand the interchanges and also challenge some of the prior theory that Southeast Asia was receiving influences from either China or from India, but rather, the reality is there was much more exchanges within the region between the peoples of Malaya and Indonesia and the Philippines, as well as the peninsular parts of Asia. And so I guess that's kind of where it started. In terms of my collection, it's predominantly contemporary Southeast Asian works, probably a bit more photography than a lot of other collectors, because there's this adage in Southeast Asia of collecting paintings as though that's the definitive source of artwork. And so there's wonderful traditions in other media in Southeast Asia. And I think that's has been a real joy to explore that. And I-Lann's work in particular, has had an opportunity to change the main media over the years from a predominantly photography-based practice to the work that's included in Borneo Heart, which is incorporating a great deal of weaving and video and performance, which is a really exciting development.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I think that the hegemony of painting exists, but when people get to the meat of it, we are so much more.
Yeah.
And there's so many more layers, so many more. I think there's a lot more adventure in the different mediums outside of painting. And I-Lann is square smack in the center of this exciting adventure of art making. So I wanted to sort of bring the two of you together through this idea of photography, because this is where this is where most people have discovered the work of I-Lann, including Jim and including myself. So this is a question actually that Jim posed, and I'm just going to read it just so we can start off the conversation, and I-Lann can answer, and Jim, you can jump in anytime, and if there's anything you feel like saying. So I-Lann, you have a strong practice using photography. Can you please let us know how and why you embarked on the current weaving practice?
By accident, in short. It coincided with my need to move back home, which was a gradual process over 2016 and 2017. And I think basically my photography practice has never really been obsessed with the camera per se, but with photography, the object, the medium itself. And I work a lot with the photography archive, for example, right? And I'm captured by storytelling. I love stories and narratives, and I love other stories, the ones that you don't read about, the ones that if you look for, you will find, but they may not be your first encounter, So a lot of my photography practice has been about unpacking archives, unpacking images, reading images, and then I was kind of weaving stories together, to literally use the word weaving. It was taking elements from here, taking elements from there, and in a way, going into a literal woven medium came about initially through photography, ironically, through these old family photographs, with myself included in the 1970s as a child, on my grandmother's woven mats. And I was looking at these mats and asking my father about them. And then I realized that they contained all these stories. I couldn't even find the plant that my grandmother was weaving with. The plant itself was becoming, it took me a year to find the plant. It was the plant was getting lost. So not only did I realize the plant was getting lost, the knowledge that came with the plant on how to process the plant, how to use the plant, the stories embedded within the plant were also being lost. And that started me on this sort of thread, if you like, to sort of unpack what my grandmother's mats might mean for me at this point in my life where I'd left one community quite definitively, and I was trying to find and build another community back home and relearn how to be back home. And to enter back home, it's not as easy as it sounds. You just go back home. It's not quite like that. I mean, I've never left, but I haven't lived here for like 25 years, even though I'm always back. It's different when you're actually living somewhere and you move your studio here. And so entering through these old photographs, realizing that the mat was a platform to so much more, to methodology, to storytelling, to communities, to histories, to gender issues, ideas of like who I was as an artist, my interest in the circular economy. All of this came about through the platform of the mat and working with communities of women. And I don't see a great separation between my art practice when I was predominantly using archives of images and the photomedia and using Photoshop and the digital image, and what I'm doing with the weavers. And I still work digitally as I plan my work with the weavers. So there's direct correlations, and also this idea of the baggage that the archive brings, that community weaving histories bring, all of that baggage, other histories, traces through time. It's all there in the photo medium, as well as in craft, in the woven works.
No, I think it's one of the things that's quite interesting is this idea of coming back. To go back. What in German, the term is wieder da, which translates as again there, because you can never really go back. You're just again at that place, which I think is kind of an interesting way of thinking about that return and that the challenges that confront somebody when they do that. So for those who are not as familiar with your practice, I mean, I think one of the things that was really interesting to me is your Picturing Power series, which you did back in 2015 or 14, that type of time. 13, okay. That period was really looking at the idea of the camera and pictures, the colonial archive of photographs, as an instrument of power. And I was curious if you could maybe talk a bit about that, and then how that might be related to what you're doing now as perhaps upending or changing that concept of power dynamics.
Great observation, Jim. Directly related. Picturing Power was looking at largely the Tropen Museum collection of images from colonial Indonesia, the Dutch period in Indonesia specifically. And I was looking at, I asked myself a basic question when approaching this archive of photographs was, how do you colonize someone? Like, what is the process to colonize? How do you do it, you know? And through photo archives of trying to find, if you like, evidence within a large collection of images. And Picturing Power came to the conclusion of the violence of administration. It was the violence of the table. You colonize someone via the table. A table is much more violent than even a gun. A gun will shoot you dead. A table is multi-generational. The violence is embedded within your sense of self. And Picturing Power explored the table. It explored the surveyor, that the map maker that enters the land and defines the land, defines the fence, the border lines. It looks at photography as a colonizing instrument, especially during a colonial period. And it looks at power structures of the table, of the architecture of a table, the social environment that a table changes. Throughout Southeast Asia, especially the archipelago of Southeast Asia, we never had tables traditionally, historically. We only had mats. Everyone sat on a mat on the ground. The word mesa comes from the Portuguese and Spanish word mesa. Mesa is the Malay word for table, from the Portuguese, Spanish mesa. So even the etymology of the word describes the colonial bringing in of the tables. The table that told you who you were, that developed the census, that developed museums, what was considered worth keeping or of value in a museum, all these questions. So if Picturing Power was about the table, Borneo Heart goes back to the mat. So I think of the table, Picturing Power, and the table as being patriarchal, as colonialistic. I think of the mat as feminist, egalitarian, democratic. Yeah.
Okay, so in a sense, your earlier works, which were addressing issues of identity, racial politics, colonialism, contemporary politics, as well as power. In terms of the Borneo Heart exhibition, these are what, moving beyond that theme, or basically challenging that?
I think most of my art practice is a result of my own exploration to try and understand something, right?
Okay.
So if picturing power as an example, or tabled an installation of the 50 plates, was all about this sort of the weight of colonialism, what Borneo Heart tries to do, what I'm trying to do, is find a methodology to decolonize beyond theory, and to put it to as an artist, to make action, to put all the thoughts and the theorizing into real practice, and to decolonize the way I work and operate as much as I can, or to recognize my role within these power structures, and how I might be able to, through my art practice, practice what I preach, if you like, and also question within me is this question of why do I bother making art? Why be an artist? What role can my art practice play in sort of these bigger conceptual ideas I have about being a citizen of the world, you know? Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to find a methodology to match the theory, the art practice, and living within community and with other people, you know, the social environment, with histories, with current politics and all the rest of it, facing it up front, never running from it, but rather than theorizing, I want to try and put it in practice.
Okay. So it reminds me of a dinner that we had at my house.
Lovely night. I so enjoyed that. I know exactly which night you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And I gave you my theory of that every collector has exactly the same best work in their collection. And there was you, June from Bro Projects, as well as Aaron from Sasabasak. And so we had a gallerist, a curator, and then yourself as an artist. And my theory was that the best work in a collector's collection is the next one. And you said it was the same for you, that you felt that, you know, the next one is going to be the one where people are going to understand what you're trying to get across. They're going to be able to pull it together and really sort of see that. And to a large extent, when I was looking through Borneo Heart, I was like, I think she's really moved a huge step forward in her practice and moved across in terms of giving voice to the community, to this art form, which some people would refer to as craft, but it's an art form. It's gorgeous, and such. And I'd like maybe if you could talk a little bit about that movement and the progress in terms of trying to articulate your voice, or what you're trying to, the message you're trying to get across.
But I try and explain it this way. A lot of my earlier works, when I was weaving together bits of photographs to make a narrative, were planted, if you like, on a horizon line. I don't know if you've realized that, but I would literally map out perspective and images I would dictate a perspective. I would dictate an entry point. With this current body of work, ironically, a lot of the time I'm on a coastal area where the horizon line is very definitive. You see it very clearly, but I've let go of the horizon line, and I've let go of trying to pin an entry point or a perspective that stems from me. I'm not the center of the world anymore. So what I describe that is I just dived in, and now I'm swimming around, and there's no horizon line. And I hope that I can come up for some air, but I'm just going with it. There's, to match your German story, I've forgotten the word already. From the natural world, I feel like I feel also a bit like a turtle. So if you know about turtles, if a turtle is born on a beach in Semporna, where I'm from, where I've been working, it will, and the little hatchling goes into the sea. It will travel the world for 30 years, but inside its system, there's a GPS system, and the turtle will return to the same beach that it was born on in order to lay its eggs for the next generation of turtles. But there's this inbuilt knowledge about where home and place is. And you go, you journey, but you come back to this beach before you go off again, right? To lay your eggs. So I kind of feel like a turtle that's been swimming around, and so yeah, that's not a very good response to your lovely statement, but I'm finding my way. I'm swimming.
Okay.
I'm trying to let go of being a dictator and placing things in a highly contrived. I don't want to use the word. I don't want to belittle any of it. I want to let go more, and I want to be influenced, and I want to be a conduit for other action, other people's action. So I just want to allow things to happen, and to hold dear what grounds me is instinct, and of the turtle, of knowing home. That's the best I can describe it, I think.
The question to I-Lann about the show, about the pieces in the show. I mean, it's a huge show, and it covers so much ground. And I wanted to ask you, which of the works do you feel has which of the works do you feel most strongly about? And that's one, which you feel most strongly about, and of course, why. And the second is, if there was one work that the future should see, maybe 50 years hence, what work would it be?
Tika Meja, in answer to both questions. Tika Meja, to me, to describe it, is a very large installation of 60 mats as a whole installation, consisting of bandanos woven, colorful heritage Bajau Samada Laut mats with a silhouette of a table on the mat. What that work is about linguistics, it's about power, it's about gender, it's about decolonizing art history, it's about decolonizing the museum, it's about flipping the table, lifting the tika, lifting communities, lifting the local. The contemporary art world, I feel, it's always wanting to be global and international. Whereas I feel that there's a lot of answers in the extreme locals. And I think that Tika Meja as a work is core to the whole Borneo Heart exhibition. It's actually the first woven work that I started with, even before the NGS piece, which was installed 2019. But we'd already started making these experiments with the mat and the table. But fundamentally, the ideas within that, within the linguistics of the mat, conceptually, is about decolonizing the future. It is about decolonizing knowledge, is decolonizing gender, decolonizing identity politics. I don't get obsessed by identity politics at all. In fact, I think that it's counterintuitive in many ways to talk about identity politics, because it kind of re-puts people in boxes. But what I hope with Tika Meja is it explodes all of that. It flips the table. And in the process of flipping the table and lifting the mat, so much other knowledge is going to come to the fore. And those mats are made by stateless people with no paper identity. And power is everywhere. The current global politics, power is something that's, I mean, Malaysia right now, our parliament is in suspension because of this COVID excuse, right? So to me, that is a major work. And it was a driving work in the way that I behave, in the way that I de-patriarchal my tendencies, and to bring up the feminist, to act as a feminist, not just say it. So to me, I think it's one of my most important works, for a lot of conceptual reasons.
Okay. I-Lann, this idea of focusing on the local, I shared the PDF of the exhibition with a friend of mine in KL. And when he saw the work Louvres, he immediately said, I have to get this. This is such an incredible work. And I was like, he said, you wouldn't understand it. He said, but to me, he said, to someone from Malaysia, it is instantaneously understood what that work is about. And I guess maybe you could make a comment about how people from outside of Malaysia, outside of Southeast Asia, who will be encountering your work through this OVR, can get a sense of how they might understand it or appreciate those works.
The 3 hovering louvres.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those Louvre windows are based on my bedroom windows. My bedroom windows since I was 5 years old. I moved home to my parents after 25 years, the same bedroom windows. But I love those. I can relate to your friend, and we come from exactly the same spot, which is to understand the feeling of our hot, wet air. Yeah. Right, and the reason that they're Louvre windows is because that is Southeast Asian contemporary or modernist architecture.
Exactly.
It immediately locates where Louvre windows are us, right? Yeah. And what it does to me and my bed. So below the 3 hovering louvres, there's a mat, which is the placement of my bed. That's my dream time space where I think up most. I'm not idle. I do a lot of sleeping, but I do a lot of work when I'm sleeping. And the feeling of that hot air describes our environment. That weight of that air and that familiarity and that knowledge locates us. It's a geographic indicator for me. Mm-hmm. How other people may approach it. Well, number one, it's incredible weaving. I mean, those women are incredible. And that weave, we invented a weave that got Jolita, Lily, Didi, myself. We accidentally invented a new kind of, or we think we invented a new kind of weaving. It's not a repeat pattern or not a tessellated pattern, but it meanders. A very, very difficult weave, but very beautiful. But it's about architectural space. And I think that globally, people have a familiarity with how they interact with architectural space, how you live within space, and how that space is designed with its environment in mind, how to best live in your environment. So this one describes our particular heat, if you like. Yeah.
Okay.
I hope they can relate.
Yeah. I think he was ecstatic when he was able to purchase that work. So
I've got a private joke that's not so private anymore if I tell it here. But it's called 3 hovering louvres with a capital L in direct reference to the Louvre of Paris, which is a depository of European art knowledge and art product and art thinking and art language. And so too our 3 hovering louvres, containing within them the depository of a millennia of weaving knowledge, of
Mm-hmm.
knowledge about the materials and the environment, of these women whose storytelling is deeply embedded within motifs. Southeast Asia is always described as this place that doesn't have written language, except from the Batak of Sumatra or the Bugis navigational maps. But to me, that negates an entire hundreds of communities with motives that can be read, and they're multi-generational and they're multilingual. So you can learn another community's motives and you can read them. They communicate. Is that not language? So to me, my sly little private joke to myself, Syok sendiri, they say in Malay, is we've got 3 hovering loops. They're hovering, yeah, just ready to be claimed, you know.
Okay, excellent. I think, thank you. That really helped pull it together. We chatted before, but I'd like you to perhaps talk a little bit about gender and community in this work, and then also how this work and a lot of the work being done in 2020 played a very different role in terms of what that meant in terms of community and art making in Sabah.
For Borneo Heart, I would say 80% to 90%, 80% of the work was made in the year 2020 during COVID, during lockdown. To talk about the 2 communities, the inland communities from Keningau, which is right in the center of Sabah. It's always been a political heartland of Sabah or North Borneo under the British. It's where a lot of our early politicians and current strong politicians come from. And the community there are Dusun and Murut weavers. They weave primarily in bamboo that comes from the jungle. So we still buy the bamboo from Murut men who collect it from the jungle. It's not cultivated. And then so the bamboo is collected by the men, it's woven by the women predominantly. I do have 2 men in that team. And then the second community that I work with is an island community on the Sulu and Celebes Seas border. It's called Pulau Omadal. And the community there are Bajau and Bajau Samadalaut community. Some are Malaysian and some are stateless, all centered around this island. And they weave in pandanus, which is a coastal plant that the women are now cultivating. So to me, this Borneo Heart work, the body of work, I've become a little bit obsessed with the ideas of the circular economy, this idea of a more equitable economic system, regenerative, sustainable, innovative, healthier, right? And with working with women in both these communities during COVID, also ideas of the domestic economy, my silly little art practice became really important because I was making economy. And we were not just making economy, we were also planting. We were also generating economy from people that we were buying materials from. The people were losing their jobs because they're largely, craft is very tied in with tourism industry, for instance. No tourists, no sales of craft, no in the island community, no lobsters for, restaurants. So husbands were at home, the women were working with this weaving continuously. They never stopped during COVID. And to me, that I like the responsibility that gave to the art. I like the weight of that. It felt like art wasn't just about theorizing some grand notion, but it felt like it was real, that it was making it its economy. Being part of Art Basel is part of that. I think of you, both of you, as collaborators also. You're part of this whole chain that stimulates more innovation, more making, more empowerment, self-confidence, more art. I'm into the art as well. I don't want to negate the art, right? Or the thinking that goes into the work. But all of that, it just felt real somehow. Yeah.
I think when we discussed this before, you said it's a true example of where art can change the world,
Yes.
where art can change people's lives.
Yes.
And I think that, to me is I think wonderful. And there's, to be able to have an artwork where in looking at it, there's so many layers in terms of the history, the technique, the almost lost heritage and practice, and finding a way of bringing that forward again, and at the same time really connecting with people who are speaking for themselves, for their cultures, their understanding, and being able to bring that across, I think is just wonderful. And to be able to do that.
Yeah, I strongly feel that art can change the world. I know, and I do not mean it in any arrogant kind of way, or maybe a little bit, but it does.
I wanted to ask you about language, because you mentioned language, and I think a piece that's so very poetic in this show is the Tika Reben.
Yes.
And you mentioned that it is a piece that is both actual and metaphorical. Actual in that there is language woven into this 63-meter ribbon, and metaphorical in that it becomes a bridge, of a physical and metaphorical bridge between two communities. So I wanted to ask you about that piece, and segueing into this idea of video and performance, because you've always done production. I think you started out creatively as a production designer. So I wanted to ask you about these videos that you've made, and the performances. So first Tika Reben, and then the videos and performances.
Tika Ribbon is a dictionary. It's an index. It is woven by Kak Rosia, Sana, Kinohong, and Kodil. 3 are stateless, 1 is Malaysian. The geography of the island, the Malaysian community live on the land of the island, and then the stateless community, the Samada Laut, live in the water village, which they normally live in the Lepa houseboat. So the water village tends to be temporary housing during monsoon, where they sit out storms at sea, but then those houses become over time a little bit more built up. So the Tika Ribbon is an index. It's a dictionary of basic Bajau counting patterns and rhythms that form the basis for most of their weaving. It is not a complete index or a complete dictionary, but it's an indication of, it was to represent kind of a dictionary, because, weaving is never considered to be a language, or it's not included in the motives are not included as part of language. I think it is. And here's a dictionary of counting patterns. And when we stretched it across the 2 communities, from Kak Rosia's house to Kak Budi's house, it became a bridge across paper identity, with a shared community that has a millennia of shared history. And yes, it's a bridge that is metaphoric, it's physical. It was shot by Andy Chia. Yes, I don't know what else to say about it. It sounds so simple, being just a ribbon, and it is quite a simple work, but it's so weighty. It carries hopes, dreams, nenek moyang knowledge, the knowledge of ancestors, which in Malay, nenek moyang refers to sort of like, it's a gendered term. It's a female ancestry. So it's all of that.
Right. And the videos, the performance?
This is the second time that I've done video work of my own, really, in terms of art. The first video work being part of a Pontianak video, which I really didn't like. And I've never really shown it because I wasn't happy with it. It didn't do what I wanted it to. I failed with that, I think. I'm still working on it. It's kind of like not there yet. These two videos in this work, well, there's three video works actually. I was very certain in a way about making them. That there wasn't, I didn't have that ambiguous, I knew what I was doing with these works. The prior Pontianak work, I didn't. I've been working in the Malaysian film industry as a production designer since 1994. My first film is 96. So I'm very, very familiar with filmmaking, but it's taken me a long time to actually make my own films. I think that I need to know why I'm making a film, or why it's in the film time-based medium versus a photography work or something else. But these works that became the three video works needed to be video works.
Yeah. For the seven-headed hat, because it's an incredible piece that it's just so weird, but it's so we want to know about it. Could you let us know about that work and the performance that's of this dance group, of these men? What are they doing?
Okay, that hat, it's called a Landau hat. It's based on a traditional Murut hat. And the Murut people from the Keningau area where I've been working are known as the jungle people. They're the hunters and the gatherers historically. And we still buy our bamboo from the Murut community. And in the hat, there's a singular hat, there's 5 spires. And in the Murut hat, they represent 5 trees. So I've extended these 5 trees into an interconnected, interdependent canopy or root structure or some kind of DNA chain or rhizomic something. And then with the video work, because there's the female and the woman, the weaver, the woman's storytelling, the linguistics of the mats are so female and so gendered in that way. I wanted the balance of having a very male work or something that looked at the male being as well as the body. So to me, there's some anxiety within that work. I think of it as kind of a male anxiety. It's choreographed by a guy called Azizan Daniel, who was the founder of the Tagap's Dance Theatre. It's performed by 7 dancers from Tagap's Dance Theatre. They're a very young group that I met on Instagram. They do a lot of like hip hop music videos and break dance, and they also do traditional performances for like Sabah tourism and things like that. But they've got this incredible energy and this incredible hunger to do stuff. And then also letting the hat dictate a little bit, the shape of the hat, the conjoining. It's also a bridge, like Tika Ribbon. They're the 2 bridges in the exhibition. It's ambiguous. It's a bit sci-fi to me. It's a little bit Daft Punk in music reference. But to me, I didn't want it to be located in past times. It has to be, it's contemporary. It's about now. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I think the choreography also, there's something, all the sounds that are made and the movements that are made, they feel, yes, alien and sci-fi, but also very primal and jungle.
Yeah.
And it creates sort of this this on one hand very alien and foreign, but on the other hand very familiar. And I think that's what makes the work super successful, because it has this pull.
Yeah. You're our neighbor in the Philippines, right? When I say Borneo to you, well, when I say Borneo anywhere in the world, everyone goes, oh, the Borneo headhunter, right? There's this male headhunter character that we all, that's our stereotype that we kind of grow up with. And in a way, it addresses that as well. But at the same time, it is there, this deep knowledge about the environment, the jungle, this male warrior. The piece is called Bangkis, which is a Kadazan, my grandmother's Kadazan. It's a Kadazan Dusun war cry, or it's a call. And at the end of the visual dance piece, you hear the gong. And this gong is also a call. It's calling people. And then some of the Bangkis sound that we had is being internalized. They're swallowing the yell. So instead of coming out, it has been swallowed. It's been reversed into you're internalizing it. Right. So it's also it's the smell of mud also. You know, it's this deep knowledge that you just know that's hard to describe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to also shed or put the spotlight on this longest running body of work that you completed.
Ah, yes.
The Rasa Sayang.
My slow art, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Tell us how did you decide to end this? And well, tell us about it, and how did you decide that this would be sort of weirdly in the time of COVID, when the hug is the most elusive of human gestures.
It started
becomes so prominent.
Yes, it started in 2012. It didn't know in 2012 that it was going to be a series. I thought in 2012. I remember Jim at the opening of that show in Singapore, 2012. Mm-hmm. It was going to be a one-off at that time, but then I kept having more to say. So I decided every 2 years I was going to have this little emo outburst. Something that's been going on in my mind for that, some phrase or some words that had been on repeat for that 2-year duration between chapters. So the series stretches from 2012 to 2021. It ended this year with the phrase, "Send me your arms in an embrace," in the year that the embrace and the arms became outlawed because of COVID, right? But what it was a reaction to political climate. Specifically, "The sun will rise in the east and deliver us from this long night" was chapter 1, made in 2012. And that was about East and West Malaysia specifically, but the work I don't want it to be stuck in Malaysia, but it was my starting point of this political animosity between sides that are not listening to each other. So in a way, we see it very clearly in the US between the extremes of the political landscape in the US, where there's great judgment and prejudice against the other. And so this whole series is very much about frustration with political animosity and people not listening to each other. So what the hugs are, people donated me hugs. There's 488 hugs in total. People have donated me hugs from across Malaysia, and I've removed all identifying factors. So you can't tell what gender they are, you can't tell what age they are, you can't tell what religion they are, you can't tell if they're rich or they're poor, you can't tell if they're urban or rural, you can't tell if they're from East or West Malaysia, you can't tell anything about them, except maybe they might have a tattoo or they might have a Buddhist thread or but very, very few identifying elements on these arms. And what you're left with is this deep humanity of the need to love and be loved. And that's what the series is about. And it's about the emotional frustration at being held away from people and not allowed to love or be loved, you know, because of prejudices. So, and a lot of the mantras are things that have been in my head on repeat. I wonder by my troth what thou and I did till we weaned. It's from a John Donne poem since I was in high school. And it's just one of my favorite John Donne poems. Yeah.
I think that's a good space. That's a good place for us to sort of wrap up the discussion. So maybe Jim, if you have one more question.
I think that was it, because the last question I had down was about the Hug series coming to fruition. So I think that, yeah, we've covered the key things.
Can I point out one thing about hugs that sometimes people miss? So the orange and blue opposite on the color wheel, right? Complementary colors. So when you look at where the orange and the blue meet, it's a cheap trick. The retina of your eye can't hold it still. There's this quiver between the orange and the blue, and the retina quivers like that, right? So the line is never still, but moving in your eye. And that's, to me, kind of how I always want to feel, is that slight, never at this total balance, but this quiver, this potential movement of that slightly unsettled, uncertain, bound up rubber band quiver energy, right? Energy transference. So I really want that energy in work. Yeah.
You know, so we're gonna take some questions from the audience. So if people could just type up their questions in the chat box, and we will get to them. So thank you, Jim. Thank you, I-Lann. And now let's have some questions from the audience.
Thank you, Isa.
Thank you.
So did I-Lann see a shared sense of community among the different peoples? Could she speak to us about it? And would she say there were notable distinctions between the Malaysian weavers and the stateless ones? What might they be? How did being stateless affect the sense of community? I-Lann. Great question, huh?
Yeah,
the heart of the matter.
Great questions. First of all, Abe, between the Dusun and Murut weavers, I don't think that there has been a specific project that included these two particular communities specifically. I can't think of one anyway. But when I was working on the Tika Agaga for MGS in 2018, 2019, and I wanted to work with the two halves of Sabah's people, indigenous peoples, the land people and the sea people. The communities were not that keen to disturb the other person's weave. So there was resistance to literally weaving together. And I found this really interesting because both sides felt that there was so much national sort of propaganda about unity and stuff like that. They just wanted to highlight their own weave. They didn't want to disturb the other person's weave. At the same time, they were very interested and very appreciative of the other person's weave, but they wanted to celebrate their own materials and their own weave. So we did a two-sided mat. We didn't use, the communities didn't literally weave together. So I found that really interesting because there's so much homogenization of culture in Malaysia, and the fight to keep your own identity and your own voice and speak your own voice was a very, very strong feeling amongst both the communities. The second question, Isa, what was the second question? About the communities.
The second question was about Yeah, the distinctions between the stateless and the Malaysian weavers.
The thing is that both communities are Bajau. They come from the same historic lineage. Our border is 58 years old. Living memory is far greater. Our borders are fluid. They're the same people. It's the table that's interrupted the relationship.
Right, right.
A lot of the master weavers actually come from the stateless communities, where they're still using their mats for things like dowry mats, and in work, and to use on their lepa houseboats. They use mats more than the established communities on the land at Pulau Omadal. But in terms of their relationship, they work very, very closely together, and they're very intertwined. It's really state politics and hard power that separates the communities.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. The next question has to do with, has working with weavers changed the way you practice art or tell your story? Did it make you want to tell more stories through the medium of craft? This is from Suryana Senja alias. And the connected question is about the Tikar Meja from Puppet A. Does it mean there are 60 individual stories for each of the Tikar?
Okay, I can only deal one question at a time.
Okay. I feel that that's a connected answer, so.
Yeah, sorry, what's the first question from Suryana?
The first question is, has working with the weavers changed the way you make art?
Yes.
And you want to keep doing it?
Absolutely. It's changed the way that I approach art, or what I want art, the kind of artist I want to be, the kind of way that I want to work. I love working with other people. I love that sense of a team on building stuff and innovating and finding languages that exist in terms of craft knowledge, craft histories, and seeing how that can be translated to express something from contemporary times. So to me, it's also multiple voices rather than my own all the time.
Right, right. Okay, and then the Tikar Meja, does it mean there are 60 individual stories to correspond to the 60 tables that are on the big piece?
Yes, to a degree, yes. Yes and no. They are all heritage Bajau and Bajau Samadalau mats in terms of heritage designs that come from the community. They have selected which stories to tell. For example, there's a mat there that is Harunan Motol, which is a motif of the steps from a small perahu dugout to a houseboat. But then the tables come from a range of tables. They're colonial tables, they're admin office tables, they're IKEA catalog tables. There's also, the weavers were also doing a survey. Kak Rosia and her children did a survey of the tables on the island. So there's also Kak Rosia's kitchen table, there's the teacher's table, the student's table, the rehal that holds up the Quran was considered a table, a lectern that politicians and important people use to make their speech. So if you start looking at the tables, they do contain, the tables represent different forms of power and different forms of importance, and the motives as well come from that whole lineage of motive storytelling. Yeah.
That's great. I wanted to ask a question. It might be a little, I guess it's a question that might be a little sticky, but I feel like it needs to be asked. Mm-hmm. And it was sent in by Jude van der Merwe. I think she's in Australia. And there might not be time for this, but I'm interested to know how I-Lann manages the potential for personal burnout. This way of working is so important and so powerful, but it carries its own risks as you try to manage continuous expectations.
there is a really heavy burden of making sure that there's continuous work, especially in the time of COVID. And when you're, one of the aspects of working with community and that relationship is that you need to step up. There really isn't much option in that you become responsible for well-being of a lot of people. But having said that, they have also enriched me and energized me in ways that make me excited, where for a while I wasn't excited about art. So the way that they feed me is so important that, you know, I love it. I just want to keep working, you know, and they want to keep working, and we have so much fun. There's so much play involved. There's so much uncertainty also, like we often have no idea what we're doing, but we're going to try it. And I love that bravery. I love their desire for more.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's enriching for everyone, I think.
Yeah.
I think I can say that.
So maybe we can wrap this up with the last question, which is, what is next? Can you tell us the exhibition schedule for this Borneo Heart and what you're up to, you know, for the rest of the year? Because I know you have a full plate, and we got to get as many people to see your work as possible.
The next show is with Mizuki at the Center of Heritage Art and Textile in Hong Kong. And I'm so excited about this show because it brings together Borneo Heart along with Picturing Power, along with the Orang Besar batik pieces. And I think of the way that I work is often in chapters because I'm exploring ideas through, and sometimes one series is not in a way it's incomplete. And so when you have so many works coming together that we will have at Chat, I think it opens August 9th and runs to November. I'm very excited about that show. And then I'm showing with Jude at Indian Ocean, the inaugural Indian Ocean Textile Triennial. Jude is here. Hi, Jude. And then the weavers, I don't think this has been announced yet, but the weavers from Pulau Omadal have been included in APT. So they're
Awesome.
they're showing as themselves, not as me. So I'm really thrilled by that because they're claiming the weavers are stepping up as artists in their own right. And that for me is an absolute thrill. Separate from me when they're doing it on their own. So that's really exciting. And then hopefully Borneo Heart will go to KL. Yeah.
Right, great. So with that, I want to thank everyone who has taken the time, the hour and some, to join us tonight, or wherever you are in the world. Thank you, Jim, for your super questions, which were spot on. Thank you to Art Basel for having our I-Lann on the OVR portals. Thank you to the curators, to Christina Lee, who was really a champion for this. And thank you, I-Lann, for being who you are.
Oh,
so with that,
thank you for having me, and thank you, Christina. I'm so thrilled that you included Borneo Heart. I really am. It's such a thrill. Yeah, and thank you, Jim. Thank you, Isa. Thank you to Rogue Art also. Yeah.
Please visit the exhibition website. It's at borneoheart.yeelann.com. This is a live, active, and growing website that is not just about the show, but about everything, the ripple effect of this exhibition, which is huge. So with that, good night, everyone, and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.